it came out that they were now reconsidering.
You mean Blinken?
Yeah, Blinken did reconsidering. That they allowing Kiev to use these missiles on Russian territory. Um, he came up with the excuse that, well, the Iranians are supplying missiles to Russia, so therefore, but there's no. First of all, I don't know that it's true. I don't even know why the Iranians would be supplying missiles to Russia. Russia has such a huge arsenal already, and then clearly, it seems to me that Iran is in need of like every missile that it has because it could, it could find itself in a war with Israel at any moment now. So it just doesn't seem to me likely. But that's the rumor, or those are the reports. But even if they did, whether they're saying 200 missiles, what does that have to do? It's just like, Russia buys some missiles from an ally. Okay, well, I mean that's what everything. That's what Ukraine does all day long. That's basically Zelensky's seems like sole purpose in life is just to get more missiles. So there's hardly any balance here. That's not the issue. It has nothing to do with that. The issue is that you are, and you rarely see this discussed in the West. They don't talk about it. They put it in terms of, well, just fairness. They should be able to fire back, but they don't talk about the fact that these require our participation. They need our technicians, our data, and, to make them effective. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. Everything, this whole,
right.
Iranian issues that come
on the ground coordinating and using their GPS to guide Russian missiles into Ukraine or to use their own missiles, Iranian missiles. Yeah. Right. I think that is something that is overlooked. I think for the most people that are casual observers of the war, they just assume like, oh, well, we just give this stuff to them or sell it to Ukraine, and the Ukrainians just use it how they see fit. It's not our problem. We didn't do anything. But like you said, we have to realize that, no, if we are on the ground, giving them, inputting the data, coordinating it, selecting the target, approving it, we might even be pushing the button. Who knows? Or it's such as we have some Ukrainian push it.
Yeah.
It's at that point, it's like, okay, if you're holding the hand that's holding the gun pointing in, you help pull his finger to pull the trigger.
Yeah,
it's you. Yeah. You're the one doing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Clearly
well,
an accomplice.
So this is a major escalation. Would you say this is?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but it seems likely, just based on past experience.
Right. How
it
credible?
is. It certainly is. I mean, again, remember, it wasn't too long ago that we said, okay, we're going to allow just very limited use of certain weapons, not including ATACMS. It's just like up to HIMARS. They can fire it into
the Kharkov.
P-2014.
Right.
Yeah. So he's talking about Kharkov in particular, because they were complaining that, okay, they launched this attack and we weren't able to fight back. If we would have been able to hit a troop assembly points or the convoys or whatever with your HIMARS, we could have stopped this. And so he said, okay, for defensive purposes within that limited scope, like if they're launching a raid, or an offensive from Kursk or Kharkov or one of these regions that border directly, then to stop it, you can fire directly at military assets on the other side. Now now we're going to new weapon systems and we're expanding the scope. We're saying, you can just. So it's just these things don't hold. You see why Zelensky just makes a pain of himself, because he finds that if he just he keeps on complaining and griping about the U.S. or NATO not giving him the weapons he wants. He knows that if he keeps on complaining, eventually it will give them to him. He's probably thinking it'll just keep on going all the way up to nuclear weapons or something.
Well, he might be right.
He might be right.
It didn't take very long, I feel like, for them to crack on the long-range missiles.
Right. I mean, I was, again, I guess foolishly optimistic, because they could see the Defense Department, and maybe the Defense Department will still win out, but probably not. Probably I think Tony Blinken has Biden's ear, and what's left of his brain to communicate with.
Okay, so then let's war game this just a little bit. So, to tell us what you think Zelensky's going to do, and what do you think the Russian response is going to be, if they're given the green light.
Yeah, I don't, I really don't know. Because, we're saying, just like Lloyd Austin was saying, that it really can't do a whole lot with them. And I don't, I don't see us like allowing him to just strike soft civilian targets. I really don't think we're that crazy.
Yeah, one, Ukraine's been targeting a lot of civilian targets. I mean, the Kursk incursion for
Yeah,
sure, but with the use of U.S. coordination inputs, they haven't been
no,
right. Those
right.
missiles
What
haven't.
is
It's
so
usually
it's
shelling.
right. Sure, it's generally shelling, and then sometimes it's like those check systems, the vampire
Vampire.
systems, right? And they've done so. They've killed a lot of civilians. Poor Donetsk has been shelled for better than 10 years now, and you would just hope. They're saying it may be like the very last shelling site, like one actually maybe like the main source of shells that directed at Donetsk civilians was in Krasnogorivka, and that battle has finally ended. I mean, it went on forever. I just going back, I think in March or something, and then kept on getting these reports like they've got all like 90% of it, but that last 10% or whatever, the for whatever reason, either the Russians just didn't push very hard, or the Ukrainians just fought tooth and nail to hang on to it. But they've finally been driven out of Krasnogorivka and of the surrounding area. It's actually a very large area. There's a large pocket to the north of Krasnogorivka, and they've simply retreated. But that, what a lot of people were saying, it was maybe the last place from which they could fire artillery shells into the net. So hopefully, it certainly has slowed down. Like after Avdiivka was captured by the Russians, you notice that the shelling of Donetsk city went down, and hopefully it'll just end now. That I don't know if they have any. I hope that Donetsk is outside of artillery range. We'll find out. But yeah, that's how they usually, it's artillery shells and then and drones. There was actually a woman killed not too far from Moscow by a drone.
Oh, I saw that. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, Zelensky, we don't know exactly what he's going to do, what he's going to target, but obviously he's going to try to target something. Russia is going to have to respond. This is a red line that they really drew in the sand.
Yeah.
There is going to be response.
Right.
Your theory that you put out there, which I think makes sense, is that Russia won't necessarily directly target NATO itself or NATO base within within a NATO country. Most likely, they will go through a proxy themselves, and one that you put forward were the Houthis, to give them longer range. Which is like, okay, U.S., you are giving Ukraine long range missiles to strike deep into our country now. Okay, Houthis, here are a bunch of missiles.
Right. Right.
Go,
For example,
go to town on the U.S. ships going through the Red Sea, U.S. naval vessels. Go attack. Do you think they would turn them on Israel? I mean, obviously,
yeah, I don't think I think they would want to have them use it against some American military assets. That would be a true tit for tat. Okay, you did this. You're waging a proxy war against us. We'll wage a proxy war against you, and so that makes some logical sense.
That's scary. If they do that,
well, that's why they, I think they're reluctant to do that. But if the U.S. at some point they have to respond, because like they see this escalation just never stops. Now it's getting into truly dangerous territory. They're gonna at some point, even Putin just has to say, and one thing is we don't forget that we say, okay, Putin's very cool. He just doesn't respond to a lot of these provocations, but he does eventually. And when he does, it's major, and an example, of course, is the SMO, right? They're just say, hey, you are crossing our red lines. And it's just like, they always say they're just bluffing, whatever. He wasn't, and it was huge, right? So, again, I think they make a mistake. He's just saying, okay, he doesn't respond to every instance, every provocation, but after an accumulation of provocations and escalations, he does respond. And that very well may be how he chooses to respond, through the Houthis.
Right.
That's just a possibility. I mean, there are rumors that that the Russians were considering supplying them with anti-ship missiles.
So these anti-ship missiles, if they give them to the Houthis, does it require Russian input, Russian coordination, just like...
I don't know. I don't have the answer to that, but If it did, it would just be perfectly, fair. You just say, okay, that's what you're doing over there, and this is what we're doing here, right? So
Yeah, but
this is the consequence of what you're doing.
well, what's so scary about the United States, though, is we love to dish it. We love to dish it out to other
Right.
countries, but as soon
Right.
as somebody stands up and says
Yeah.
anything, then we
It's like,
freak out.
oh my God. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. You dare to push back or whatever, then you know how it's going to be portrayed. There's not going to be any mention about that. This is a tit for tat response because of what we're
Yeah,
doing with
yeah,
Ukraine.
'cause
over there.
right.
It's just going to be Russia and the Houthis have had attacked America. That's what's going to be the headlines blowing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
And
sure the Russians understand that, right?
And they're going to win out. Those warmongers are going to win out. Because a lot of people aren't watching it like we're watching it. And they'll just see the headlines on Fox News, MSNBC, and they will just get, I have a feeling we'll go all in if that happens. And I don't know. It's scary.
We'll see. Yeah.
But maybe, do you think we're in just speculation land right now, but
Yeah.
do you think there's a chance that, okay, let's say they use their ATACMs, they're just completely neutralized. They try to fire them into suburbs outside of Moscow or whatever, and maybe they even get the JSAMs, but none of them really do any damage because they're all neutralized with the
let's
Russia's
hope
air
so.
defense or the
Right.
electronic warfare. Do you think if that's the case, then Putin would be able to withstand domestic pressure internally to just say, like, we're not going to overreact?
Well, if it doesn't get through, right, sure. I think he would. So let's hope that that they do succeed in neutralizing, every one of these strikes if they indeed occur.
I wonder the calculation from somebody like Blinken. I understand from Zelensky, this is existential for him. He's got to do this. This is his only way out. I understand Netanyahu. They're both evil men, but I understand that they are in a fight for their own existence, their political and physical survival.
Yeah, right.
But I just don't understand our government, our administration. What's in it for us?
Right.
Why does Blinken want to do this? Does he think this will prolong the war? Does he want World War III? How much Raytheon and stock does he own? Why? What's the calculation?
I don't know. I don't. I think maybe he just really doesn't understand the situation very well. Not the way that the military people understand it better, and that's why they're saying no. It's hard to explain. But it's just again, I guess I could just go back to against it. Just this sense of being the hegemon, and this visceral, irrational hatred of Russia. Just like his irrational Zionism, it ends up blinding you to certain realities, and that's all I can say, because I think a rational actor, certainly like the U.S. during the Cold War would never consider doing anything like this. They would have a few, there would be a few hot-headed hawks, but they would be told to shut up and keep their hands off the policy. I think that but we just live in different times. We just have people, again, who are in a way just less serious, they're political animals. They're
idiots. They're idiots.
Also obsessed with short term, with image and, that kind of thing. It's just, and the consequences can be horrific. We've seen what's happened in Israel and what's happened in both places.
Let's just say that we do end up in this situation where all of a sudden the Houthis sink a U.S. naval vessel, one part of our fleet, and what happens then? Do you think what could the U.S. do? Would they try to enact Article 5? And use it to go against the Russians, even though it's the Houthis? I mean,
well,
it would just be a quagmire, just a mess.
Right.
Like, what would NATO be able to do?
Right. Well, one thing, it's just shown that they've been bombing the Houthis for months, and it just obviously hasn't worked. There's really nothing to bomb there. But at the same time, it would be a real serious blow to U.S. prestige, right? And you just have the pressures to do something significant in response would be overwhelming. Well, just think about it wouldn't be quite September 11th. Today is September 11th, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you can, it wouldn't be quite that, but it would be a major blow to U.S. prestige. That would be in some ways similar to what we experienced on September 11th, and there would be calls to retaliate. Now, and then it's like the calls to retaliate in the end had very little to do with, the actual threat. It's just there are people out there who have their plans, and they just saw the chance. Okay, yeah, now we get to overthrow Iraq, and overthrow the regime of Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with it. That's what we did. So who knows what direction it could take? It's just like
Right. We could start bombing Iran.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's right, because we would say that the Houthis are, we'll call them proxies of Iran, and then we'll just claim that there was a clear Iranian connection, and we'll start bombing Iran. Yeah, I think that's probably that's a real possibility.
I think it's more likely if this is just how messed up it is. It's more likely, I think, if Russia gives ship-killing missiles to the Houthis and the Houthis use them and sink a U.S. ship, then the U.S. will attack Iran. That's just that's how we do it.
Well, it's just like, right. And we went in and attacked Iraq, right?
Right. Okay, well, that's sobering. Let's.
Well, nothing's happened yet, but that's the whole thing about Houthis. That's speculation, but there have been reports that the Russians were considering and actually were persuaded not to do it by the Saudis, and I think even the Americans. But it's like the Americans really did. There had to be some sort of, agreement, I would think, for the Russians to say, okay, we won't do this, but, you understand you can't do that. And maybe what Tony Blinken is trying to do right now is going to upset that agreement. So, again, speculation, but it's based on reports that are really out there.
What do you think our chances are of this exploding into a real World War III possibility? Is it not too far-fetched to say that something like this is a real possibility now? Especially...
Well, yeah, of course. If NATO becomes directly involved, they will be if they, if they remove the restrictions on the missiles and supply the JSAM system without the restrictions, then, we're really on the verge of World War III, because that's NATO fighting Russia. And that's almost sort of a textbook definition of World War III. That's the World War III that we foresaw. It's very, again, there may be some things Russia does not want to fight World War III. And I think actually most people in NATO don't want to fight World War III too. They're behaving very recklessly. Some of them, I think there are a few hotheads, maybe on both sides, that really want to, but I think most don't. So it may be that even if this happens, that something will be worked out to prevent that from taking place. Again, they're obviously very reckless, stupid people, like especially on the NATO side, people like Tony Blinken and Macron. They're not actually stupid, but we'll just say that they're deluded, smart but deluded, and could take us into a war. But hopefully there are enough people that are still aware of reality that will come short of that. Again, I just see I see more reason to worry about things spinning out of control in the Middle East